Crews at the plant have been struggling to deal with contaminated water elsewhere on site. They're trying to stop hundreds of tons of tainted groundwater from flowing directly into the ocean every day. They say radioactive strontium and cesium may have been leaking into the ocean since May 2011. TEPCO officials say 30 trillion becquerels of the radioactive materials may have flowed down to the shore in that time. That's well beyond the in-house annual emission limit of 220 billion becquerels. Cesium and strontium are easily absorbed into soil, so the officials say it's hard to determine the exact amount that got out. Radioactive water has been building up every day at the plant since the accident. It's a growing problem. The short-term solution is storage. There is no long-term solution. NHK World's Noriko Okada walks us through the issue.
Workers pour 100 tons of cooling water every day into the 3 reactors where the meltdown took place. The water comes into direct contact with molten fuel and becomes highly contaminated. Company officials initially thought they would be able to reuse the contaminated water to cool the reactors. But then they discovered groundwater was seeping into the reactor buildings. They had to adapt their plan to address the 400 tons of contaminated water being pumped out every day. The company installed devices that were supposed to filter out the majority of the radioactive substances from the water. But so far, cesium is the only substance they've been able to remove. The stored water remains highly contaminated with other materials. Company officials say they are now storing some 340,000 tons of contaminated water in 1,000 tanks. They plan to add more tanks to increase capacity to 700,000 tons. But the tanks have been hastily built. Experts have often pointed out how vulnerable they are to damage. And this isn't the first time leaks have been found. Company officials have reported another grim figure. 30 trillion becquerels of radionuclide substances have been discharged into the ocean since May 2011. They say 950 trillion becquerels of cesium had leaked into the ocean before that date. That means about 1 quadrillion becquerels of radionuclide have been discharged into the Pacific.
What the fuck?
One expert says stopping the flow of contaminated water isn't enough. He's calling for more research into its effect.
Radioactive substances are accumulating in the seabed and are being consumed by fish. High levels of radiation have been detected in some of the fish. We don't know the mechanism or how it's happening. This is something we haven't fully investigated.
Kanda says information about the contamination must be fully disclosed. He says that's the only way to allay growing fear and distrust in Japan and around the world. Noriko Okada, NHK World.
Workers at Japan's damaged nuclear plant are trying to make sure a leak of highly radioactive water is under control. The contaminated water escaped from a storage tank at Fukushima Daiichi. Inspectors are checking for leaks from other tanks of the same design. They've detected spots of high radiation on the surfaces of 2. Crews with plant operator Tokyo Electric Power Company, or TEPCO, found more than 300 tons of tainted water had already escaped from one tank. They fear it may be making its way into the Pacific Ocean through a drainage system.
We cannot deny the possibility of contaminated water leaking into the trenches around the tanks. Therefore, we cannot deny that contaminated water is reaching the ocean.
Workers have transferred the remaining 700 tons of water to another container, but they've had to decontaminate the inside of the empty tank before conducting a full inspection. That could take several days. The tank is made of steel plates bolted together rather than welded. About 300 tanks of the same design contained highly radioactive water at the site. TEPCO workers are inspecting those tanks visually and measuring their radiation. They've found spots of high radiation on the seams of 2 tanks. The surfaces are dry and the water levels inside the tanks are normal. Workers are investigating whether the radiation shows water leaked in the past. Workers at the damaged Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant say a leakage of contaminated water may have gone undetected for some time. They say the storage tank doesn't have a water level gauge and their monitoring may not have been adequate. Workers found a puddle forming just outside a low wall surrounding tanks near reactor number 4. They confirmed that one of the tanks lost more than 300 tons of water. The water contains high levels of radioactive substances. Officials of the Tokyo Electric Power Company say the tank has no water gauge. They say the workers didn't notice the leak in their daily inspections until they saw the puddle outside the barrier. Nuclear regulators have urged the utility to check 350 tanks of the same structure in the compound.
If a leak occurred in one tank, we should assume that the same thing could happen at other tanks as well.
The plant produces 400 tons of contaminated water every day. That's partly because groundwater is coming into the reactor buildings through cracks in the walls.
The people who operate the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant are wrestling with yet another challenge. They'd already confirmed that more than 300 tons of highly radioactive wastewater has leaked from a storage tank, and now they say it may have flowed into the Pacific Ocean. Workers with Tokyo Electric Power Company detected high levels of radiation inside a ditch. That ditch is about 50 meters from the leaking tank, and it runs into the ocean south of the plant's port. Workers have set up hundreds of tanks on a hillside near the reactors. They erected a low wall around the tanks. Still, the water seeped out. Officials at Japan's Nuclear Regulation Authority said they're considering raising their severity rating of the leak. They rated it as a level 1 incident on the international scale that runs from 0 to 7. They're considering raising their assessment to level 3 for serious incidents. Previously, TEPCO officials had said it was unlikely that contaminated water was reaching the shore. They said the level of radioactive substances in the ocean was not as high as that on land. The regulators appear to be losing patience. They've ordered TEPCO officials to do more to prevent any further leaks. The officials from the Nuclear Regulation Authority held an emergency meeting. One of the commissioners says he doubts the system in place now is capable of preventing more leaks.
So all I'm saying is if anybody thinks that they're not going to screw you, well, good for you.
There's no record of monitoring?
No, we didn't keep any.
So you only have the memories of your workers.
The regulators have instructed workers to install water level gauges on all storage tanks to warn of any possible leaks, and they asked the operators to consider storing the wastewater elsewhere. The commissioners plan to inspect the tanks on Friday.
Japan's fisheries agency has proposed reducing catches of Pacific bluefin tuna from 2015 to control tuna resources. The agency presented the plan to about 350 fishermen from across Japan. The agency's Deputy Director General Masanori Miyahara said an international survey shows the total Pacific bluefin catch started falling in the mid-1990s. It's now close to the record low of 18,000 tons set in the 1980s. Miyahara warned the catch could decline further if fishing continues at the current rate. He said the agency will spend a year studying ways to reduce the catch before implementing the plan.
I'm very worried how it will affect our business.
I support the fisheries agency's plan to establish stricter controls.
The initiative comes amid growing international calls for stricter control of bluefin tuna resources. The agency will present its plan at an international conference next month.
Surprise, it won't come as a shock, 'cause I never believe their lies. When the bombs fall, and they could fall any time, they're gonna end it all for a third of mankind. When the bombs fall, don't have the wool put over your eyes. When the bombs fall, you'll wonder how you've been so blind. When the bombs fall, and if they fall on me, my dear, you better look to the sky, 'cause your redemption is near. When the bombs fall, when the bombs fall.
We have this brainwashing campaign. Radiation doesn't affect people who are smiling. If you are smiling, you will not have any radiation effect. This is what they're trying to convince you of. If you are not smiling, you will have radiation effect. And they proved this theory by testing it on animals. And the guy asked, what's the difference between safe and feeling safe? And he says, safe can be recognized by anyone. Feeling or recognition of safe, meaning of the feeling of safe, is really narrow, but safe is safe for everyone. And if you're like me, you're like, how does that possibly make sense, even if you did test it on somebody's dog, which I think is pretty horrific, and Peter needs to go over there and yell at some people. But if you feel safe, you are safe. So this next article has nothing to do with anything. West coast of North America to be hit hard by Fukushima radiation. So if you feel safe, then you have nothing to worry about, because you are safe in the fact that, you know, these diagrams and these graphs, they just don't mean anything. Yeah, you can see it right there on your screen, and we'll scroll down and show you some more of these graphs. You know, you can see the patterns there of the radiation moving in towards various areas. But if you feel safe, you are safe, and we have proven this by testing this theory on animals.